Welcome back to the BJJ Fanatics podcast. I'm your host, Ryan Ford. My guest today is a brown belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. At only 19 years old, he's had a meteoric rise in the sport. He recently became the youngest ADCC European Trials champion. He's also an ADCC Oceania and Asian Trials 2002 bronze medalist. He's also an ADCC Las Vegas Open silver medalist. He's a Who's Number One super fight winner and a NoGi Pan Am's purple belt champion. Ladies and gentlemen, it's my pleasure to be joined today by Jozef Chen. How are you today, Jozef?
I'm doing well. The pleasure is mine as well.
I really appreciate you being here, buddy. You've been so much fun to watch, man. It's been awesome seeing you show up on the scene. And, man, I'm really looking forward to getting to hear more about where you're from and how you came to be, man. So thanks for taking the time to be here. I really do appreciate it.
Of course. I really appreciate you having me.
Excellent. So, Jozef, the question I always start with, man, for people that don't know your background story yet, tell us about where you're from originally and what life was like before you started training jiu-jitsu.
Yeah, so I moved around a fair bit. I was born in Taipei, moved around, and basically I was in, just a brief description. If I recall correctly, I was in Kuala Lumpur, and then Doha, and then Beijing, and then Guangzhou, and then Shanghai, and then Nanjing. And then Nanjing is where I started training. Before that, didn't really do much sports. Just school, the normal thing. But yeah.
That's incredible. I mean, that's something I always love hearing, man. I love hearing the background of different people and what they did before jiu-jitsu, because a lot of times I'll meet people that had like real athletic backgrounds, like they wrestled or they played football, or so you could see that transition being smooth, like going from one sport to another. But I also love people like yourself that don't have a particular athletic background, but they're clearly just smart guys that got into this really analytical sport and are able to dominate, man. So it's so cool to see that. Were you always into like strategy-based things? Did you play chess? Were you into video games? Was there anything that you did before jiu-jitsu that you think kind of translated to what you're doing now?
Surprisingly enough, not really. I mean, I did some degree of sports just because I wasn't necessarily unathletic, but I wasn't particularly good at anything. I did like swimming and stuff like this, but not to any high level. And then even in video games, I wouldn't say I applied myself. I feel like jiu-jitsu was the first time that I really wanted to get good at something, whereas video games or other things, even school, I had very little motivation to try to get good at it. So it was actually quite interesting for me having jiu-jitsu be the reason why I kind of tried figuring out how to get better at something, because for me at least, it felt like the first time where I really wanted to apply myself in this regard.
That's really incredible, man. I can relate 100% on that with the school thing, man. As a kid, I was very like ADD, and it was very hard to keep me locked into anything. And I can relate, man. Yeah, jiu-jitsu is something I totally fell in love with. And it's funny that getting choked and armbarred and things like that is what made me want to pay attention to something. You know what I mean? But what do you think it was about jiu-jitsu itself that really locked you in more than anything when you first walked on the mats?
Yeah, I mean, I think... I don't know if there's, to me at least, it was something special about jiu-jitsu, but just the way it was presented to me was different than other things were presented. I guess, at least, I think anyone who enjoys something can see some degree of beauty and satisfaction, get something from it. And I feel like the way jiu-jitsu was presented to me as like this kind of game, and I wasn't necessarily, I felt like maybe because everyone wanted to be there, it was everyone's choice to be there. Something about that helped, whereas like something in school, like I can understand how some people enjoy certain topics at school, but it was never really, I never really understood it. And I felt that was possibly because I had no choice but to be there. So I was more passively participating, as opposed to jiu-jitsu. It was a more proactive decision to be there for me, at least, because no one told me to go train. It was more like me and a friend of mine, we were just like, oh, we knew about MMA and we thought it was cool, and we went there to go train. And I think there's a lot to be like that I really enjoy about jiu-jitsu. Obviously, like the physical component with the like ability to innovate and solve problems is something I really enjoyed. But also just the way it was presented to me it seemed to fit very well with me at the time.
That's outstanding, man. Yeah, I can understand totally what you're saying about something being obligatory versus being, something that you want to go do. And as I mentioned in your intro, you've had a crazy amount of development in jiu-jitsu in a relatively short amount of time, man. Jiu-jitsu students are constantly on the hunt for ways to accelerate their progression the way that you have. So, man, if you don't mind, I'd really like to pick your brain on specific things you did to reach the elite level of grappling so quickly, in hopes that it can inspire the listeners to find jumps in their own game. So, for starters, what are some things that you feel that you did differently in your approach to learning jiu-jitsu early on that you think differs from what most people do when they first show up and begin training?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, my jiu-jitsu journey only really changed during COVID. So before, it was more just me going after school and just training. Just I do what my instructor taught, which was actually very good. I can talk about this a little bit later. But then I think COVID was a good opportunity for me because I was in a position where I was able to continue training during this time, and I had no school obligations. And so this made it very easy for me to apply myself more fully to jiu-jitsu, whether it be listening to podcasts, watching instructionals, watching tape, just because I had the opportunity to do this without the schoolwork and other things that I had to do. So it kind of worked out in a way where, okay, I kind of got a taste of what it was like to be full time, and I really enjoyed it. And once that happened, I was like, okay, I'm gonna try stick with this and try keep doing this for as long as I can. And so things that I really think helped me were, obviously, I looked for resources online because at the time I was in Taipei, and there's a jiu-jitsu scene, but no real competitors coming out of Taipei or in Nanjing. So I remember, I recall, for the first time I saw a black belt was only maybe, it was quite a bit, maybe at least for me, it felt like a while. Maybe it was a year and a half or something into my jiu-jitsu experience. So I didn't really meet anyone who had ever competed internationally. So I felt like the only opportunity I had, or only pathway for me to figure out, okay, how can I make this as viable as possible, is looking for other people online. And this is where I referenced earlier, or previously, I would go on BJJ Mental Models, I believe just started up then. And then I also found your podcast, and I'd listen to Grappling Rewind. And these are probably there was Sonny Brown. And these are probably the main three podcasts. And I listen to a lot of yours, especially with certain guests where I remember they had very interesting insights. And I feel like having a specific athlete talk about their own different perspectives was really helpful. As opposed to looking in, or outside looking in, it can be, you can kind of make some assumptions, but it's much nicer hearing someone talk. So stuff like this, and as well as instructionals and so on and so on. So, I mean, I wouldn't necessarily say that this is different from everyone, but I definitely it was a very deliberate search for information to try to help me get better. And certain decisions I think helped, and really being motivated to do so. I was like, okay, I really want to get good. So it kind of just, I don't know, I wouldn't necessarily say it accidentally happened, but it felt like a natural progression.
That's great. So it's just a lot of just trying to absorb as much content as possible. That's really great, man. And by the way, you mentioned before we started recording that you're a longtime listener of the show, man. I wanted to say that really does mean a lot. I'm very flattered by that, man. Thank you for that. You mentioned that your instructor, you said that your instructor presented jiu-jitsu to you in a way that was very beneficial. Explain that if you don't mind. How did you, in what ways did listening to your instructor and just doing what he said in the beginning help you in your progression?
Yeah, so my first instructor was this guy named Guillaume Leclerc, and he's under Rob Bernacki, who is this guy who is based in Canada, I think in Nanaimo, and he kind of so for context, my previous coach, he's mostly, I think for the most part, he started training in Nanjing, China, and he came up there, and he basically was instructorless for a while, and then sought out Rob Bernacki as a coach. And so in this process, Rob Bernacki is known for a lot of this conceptual stuff. And it's funny now because there are a lot of like ecological approach things are becoming more popular, but Bernanke was doing similar stuff, but he might have packaged it, well, not necessarily the same, but he had different types of training that were very similar to like games and positional rounds and so on and so on, that really influenced the way my instructor taught me. And so a lot of these ideas, a lot of these, like, for example, like talking about frames and levers, and not just like saying, okay, you want to have good base or you want to have frames here, but also defining such things, I thought was very useful for me, because by defining it, it made it much more easier to think about. So like, for example, base is a platform in which you can generate and absorb force, and then you can think about that and then more deeply, and so on and so on. So this was very helpful for me, but also my coach at the time, he also encouraged me to like seek out information by myself. So not only just relying on him, but also I was in a position where I could research and like find and figure out new things, and then bring it back and then try to discuss with like my coach and teammates and so on, and encourage to play around with things. And I found that this was super helpful for me, especially when I started taking like a more like concentrated focus to jiu-jitsu.
That's excellent, man. Let me ask you, you mentioned the ecological approach to jiu-jitsu and just to learning in general. For someone not familiar with that concept, would you mind explaining that?
So, at least to my understanding, I wouldn't necessarily say I have the best ability to define it, but it's basically creating an environment where certain skills almost like come to the surface because they're in a context that requires you to use like certain reactions. Like you have a goal and you figure out a way to accomplish this goal, basically. So this is similarly like to the games that I'm more familiar with, like Bernanke. He talks about like fuck your jiu-jitsu, and this is a more of a crude way of describing some things, but this is just one form of gameplay where it's more like completely disrespecting your opponent's jiu-jitsu. And this is like a good way where you can develop good habits and skills whilst engaged with your partner, and basically having a desired outcome, kind of like, okay, what is the goal that you're trying to accomplish? Whether it be, I want to have a better ability to engage my partner, I want to have a better ability to like maintain a defensive cycle, whatever, so on and so on. And then you can design a game or a round around this. And so this is kind of like the approach, I think, like the ecological people take, as well as like Rob Bernanke.
I love the idea of games and specific training to sharpen skills, man. That really is, I think, in my own training, something that I really enjoy and something that really seems to help me. What's an example of a game that you'll play on the mats, and why do you feel it's such an effective way to practice?
So there are quite a few that I like to play. I think the first game that I was taught, and that really stuck with me, was this game in Mandarin. It translates to like Crazy Turtle. So it's just fun names, right? But
how do you say that in Mandarin? I have to hear it in Mandarin. How do you say it?
疯狂乌龟. So
okay.
Yeah, so it's just like basically you start in a side pin position. However, you're not allowed for a chest to chest. However, the person on bottom is looking to turtle. So what this creates is a situation where the person on top has to keep someone pinned that not only wants to regard, but wants to like specifically turtle, but they're not allowed to use their chest. And I would find that this creates a situation where you're used to think about like frames, levers, and wedges more critically, as opposed to just putting your weight and just like, because a cross-face underhook with chest to chest is actually quite hard to escape. If you put someone good, it's quite tough. So putting that handicap on the top player actually encourages like a lot of thought from both sides. Usually initially the person on bottom gets out pretty quickly, but once the person on top gets more experience and starts thinking about this position a little bit more, they actually can take a lot of steps to make it very difficult, because instead of thinking about it, okay, I'm just going to try hold you really tight, they think about, okay, what is actually enabling you to turtle. So for example, like, okay, maybe I can try wedge the far shoulder. So by putting my fist underneath the far shoulder, or maybe I can put my shin over the near bicep and make him unable to turn in one direction, but now he can turn the other way. So what can I do to act accordingly? And then you can think about the hips, the legs, the head, and so on and so on. And I feel like having that handicap of just, okay, you can't put chest pressure, now really gives you the option of, okay, now what can I do with all these other things?
That's
So that's
outstanding.
just like
Wow.
one example that I thought was like very useful. And there's like, you can basically, as long as you have a idea or a desired like what you want someone to do, you can design around like all of these things. Like something like I've been doing recently, just for the context of like ADCC, right? Is having someone start in guard and a person on top, and just tell the person in guard to stand up, and the person on top is forced to hold someone down. And you get to think of different mechanisms in which you are able to hold someone down, and then you can outline these, and then people can think about them more. And I find that it enables it almost forces people to think a little bit more about problems in which you might not have thought of in an open round where everything is allowed and so on.
That's great, man. That's really awesome. I really like that. Let me ask you this: for people out there that want to start applying games to their own training, but maybe the structure of their academy they train in just doesn't offer things like that, are there any games that you play where the other person's not aware they're part of your game? Like, are there things that you're just in your own world trying to do, and you know, with a participant that might not be aware of what you're doing?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely harder to do, but definitely possible. I think a way, like for example, like Bernanke's "Fuck Your Jiu-Jitsu." I think he stole this from Ryan Hall, where Ryan Hall, I remember him saying that he saw Ryan Hall just like kind of like dancing on someone, where he was just like almost just like a gargoyle on their turtle, and like in a way he thought it was like disrespecting their jiu-jitsu. So approaching someone's jiu-jitsu in the sense where you're gonna let them get everything they want, but not let them do it successfully. So you can approach this from different perspectives, but from top, for example, a good example of fuck your jiu-jitsu would be like, I just engage as deeply in your guard as I possibly can and just not let you get any offense going. However, there are issues to this because obviously if you're not communicating that's a game, let's say I fuck up and get swept, then I can't really reset. And so there are problems to this. But you can do things like that, and similarly with guard retention, where if you were to want to play a game, focusing just on your guard retention, you can play a game where you basically don't attack your partner from guard, and you just work on your guard retention. As opposed to, I find a lot of people, they almost um, disguise their weakness in guard retention with guard offense, where sometimes people have places where they're very comfortable in guard that they don't necessarily, if they're good at getting there and they're good at playing the position, it's not necessarily often in which they're not able to get there. So practicing the stuff outside of that is not necessarily very common. So sometimes people have weaknesses the moment you get them outside of their guard of choice. And I think this is something that one can choose to play. But obviously, because it's not necessarily mutually consensual, that if you fail the round, then you don't necessarily have the ability to reset. But this is one way I do this a fair bit if I'm just like cross training or something like this.
Yeah, that's outstanding, man. I love what you said there too about the tendency people have to mask their weaknesses with kind of their stronger points. And I know I've certainly been guilty of that myself. In fact, when you mentioned guard retention, that was the primary thing that I would focus a lot on my offense to hide the fact that my retention was trash. So, and I eventually doubled down and started focusing on my retention, which I'm glad I did. But speaking of focusing on weaker areas and trying to sharpen things, something that was revolutionary for me in my own progress is when I started keeping a training journal and actually like physically logging things that I was learning and not just relying on my memory to keep track of everything. How do you typically catalog your own knowledge and track your own progress?
Yeah, so that's actually quite funny because I actually started keeping a training journal from listening to you talk about this, and I eventually changed it a little bit, where like I actually have a few books of my training because I would basically just write down everything I learned in class. But at this point, I've kind of adapted it. I think I have like 3 or 4 notebooks full of this. But I eventually adapted this, especially because I find it's more important for me. Like, so for example, I'll just like describe what I do, where I kind of write down what are my thoughts and certain conclusions that I've come to from my own training and trying to derive information from training, and not necessarily from instruction. Because what I find is sometimes, like, if I were to derive something directly from instruction, I don't have the first-hand experience that really makes it stick per se. Whereas if I have something from training and I've like experienced it and it feels like there's something there, and that can often come from me watching an instructional, then I write it down. But I'm not going to watch an instructional and just write it down without having experienced it per se, because I find that there's too much disconnect there for me to actually be able to use any of it. Often what I'll do is I'll screen record an instructional, and before I like, not the whole instructional obviously, but certain portions that I really want to revisit, and then before I'm training or whilst I'm training, I'll review these and I'll like look through them, and I'm like, okay, let me try play around with this, and so on and so on. And then if I'm able to derive anything from that, then I'll write it down in my notes. And so this is how I've kind of used it in more recently per se.
That's awesome. Well, man, again, I'm flattered that you started doing that by listening to me, man. That's really cool. Yeah, I actually have to give credit where credit's due. Rafael Lovato Jr., my interview that I did with him, my second one that I did with him, is when I realized he was talking about the importance of keeping a journal, and he's like, I don't see how someone could go through the motions of jiu-jitsu and expect to remember everything in this really complex art. And I started thinking to myself, like, dude, no wonder, like, when I'll come across a move and I'll remember that I learned it like 6 years ago and just totally forgot about it, so that made me realize I do have to start writing things down. Once I started doing it, I'm like, dude, how did I only start doing this as a purple belt? Like, what? Oh my God, all the lost years, that I could have had data, and I just let it fall through my fingers. I also found that keeping a training journal will also help me approach future training sessions with more intent. Like, it helped me form goals and identify specific things I wanted to improve on. What are your thoughts on entering training with intent and purpose rather than just going through the motions? Like, do you typically have like a really well-defined list of things you're trying to do every session when you arrive to training?
Yeah, absolutely. Like, I think it's very important to have intent when training. There are times where I will because I feel like intent is very important in terms of progression, but sometimes I find that if I'm too rigorous with my intent, sometimes I get a little bored. I'm like, okay, I want to explore other things. So I do give myself the freedom to explore other things, whether it be I will practice things that so what I've been working on, this is something I will practice, but then I'll also leave time where I can practice other things that might not necessarily have been on my radar. So, like, for example, for today, my friend showed me a very interesting guard pass that he learned from an instructional that just came out. And this wasn't part of what I had planned on working on, but I worked on it regardless because I thought it was very interesting. And so it's kind of a mix between the two, but I definitely think, like, most of the time I have something that I'm trying to work on. There are times where I try to, especially now I'm not really competing as much. I find that I do have the luxury of just being able to take a lot of information. But when it comes to competing and when it's more competition season, then it becomes more refined and less, okay, I'm going to work on certain things. It's more, I'm going to work on my game as a whole, and so on and so on.
That makes perfect sense. Do you typically study people that you know that you're going to be competing against, or do you prefer to just hyper-focus on your own game? Because I know for some people it psychs them out if they're just doing nothing but watching tape of people they're going to go up against, and for others they find it to be very valuable. How does that fall for you usually?
So I found actually a very good way around this where I like watching tape, but not of people I'm going to fight, because in situations like these, I don't feel like I can look at it very objectively. I kind of get in my head a little bit too much. So I have my friend who's like functionally my coach now, Dima, look at the tape for me and make notes for me from that tape. So it works well, so I don't really psych myself out, and he can just tell me, because I trust him very much to tell me what's important, tell me what they do, what I should do, and so on and so on, because he also has a good understanding of my game and can look at my game very well. So it's very good for me in this sense. Like he's been a great help for me because yeah, otherwise watching tape of my opponents, it gets a little bit too difficult.
Yeah, there's nothing worse than like sitting and watching like a highlight reel of someone you're going to compete against. It's like only like 5 minutes of them just being amazing.
It's even worse when you're in the highlight reel.
Yeah, exactly.
This is literally what happened. I'm like, I don't need to watch this again.
Yeah, it's like, dude, just delete this. I'm not gonna. Yeah.
Shout out to Mateusz Jasinski.
There you go. Dude, we've all got one. We've all got one, man, for sure. I'm almost sure I've been in some highlight reels of other people myself, man, for sure. In fact, one I know I have. I got caught with a flying submission as a blue belt, and I was just like, oh man, I'm just gonna close my social media for a little while. Yeah, I'll come back later. You said that one thing you like to absorb is instructionals, and that they've helped you a lot in your journey, and I can definitely relate to that too. I like what you said is that you take them. It seems like you take instructionals in chunks. Like you'll record segments and sections of the instructional that are really important to you and things that you want to focus on. How do you typically absorb the knowledge from the instructionals once you've done that? Like, do you catalog them in a certain way? Do you what do you do with those chunks once you've taken them?
So generally, I don't necessarily catalog them, but I do have a fairly good memory in regards to where it's distributed amongst my camera roll. So
nice. That's a
I
struggle,
find that
yeah.
I've actually had fairly good success. Like I've actually found clips from 2 years ago, like pretty quickly, that I just remember. Oh, I remember seeing this like from some Atos training footage on Flow Grappling. Like literally, this happened the other day, like from a year and a half ago. I'm like, oh, I've seen Kynan do that, and then I found it, and so I feel like I haven't had too much issues with needing to catalog it, but something actually I do think it might be a good idea, just having it in certain folders, because my friend Dima, he does this, and I've wanted to do it, but it might have been partially out of laziness not having done it, but also maybe I don't know. I think it's not necessarily a bad idea, but personally I haven't really formatted it like this. I used to actually have an Instagram account just for uploading my tape study, but it has been a few years since I've updated it.
That's awesome. Well, dude, I'm jealous of your brain, dude. That shows a stark difference between your brain and mine, that you can find something from 2 years ago just like that. If I don't have a folder, man, it's as good as gone. So that is awesome. That
Only
you can do
with
that.
Jiu-Jitsu.
Yeah, exactly.
Nothing else. Only with Jiu-Jitsu. I think most of my brain capacity has been like purely dedicated to jiu-jitsu, because I'm mostly dysfunctional in other parts of my life.
Dude, that is so common though. I'm not going to throw any of my friends under the bus, but I got a few people I can think of where it's like, dude, everything in jiu-jitsu is great. Everything outside, it's like, dude, they're delinquent on 100 bills. They're like, they missed a summit, they missed a flight. They can't make travel arrangements on time. It's like, dude, how are you this functional in this realm of our little jiu-jitsu world, and everything else is just chaos? But that is cool though, man. I like that.
Okay, I'm gonna make sure to say I've so far never missed a flight. I don't like people who are late, but this is something I won't ever tolerate. But I mean, I have been late, but this is less very very infrequent.
That's
but maybe in everything else, but yes.
That's awesome. Well, man, we were talking earlier about like studying tape and watching opponents, and this is something I'd like to ask you about. In your opinion, like how vital has the role of competition been in your development? Like, do you feel that you could have gotten to your current skill level without competing? Could it have just been done by training in a high level environment?
This is honestly quite a good question, because I've thought about this, and I mean, obviously I can't say for certain because I don't necessarily have an identical twin that went through my whole life without having competed. But I would definitely say there's a difference, but I would say it's probably not super significant. I mean, there are definitely things that have prompted me to do more research in certain areas, but generally, like, I don't really get much satisfaction from competing. Most of my desire to train is more out of curiosity than competition. Obviously, I feel like competition is a good means to expose problems and kind of battle test a lot of these things. But I feel like I think it'd be safe to say I would be of similar level. just having trained, I do think competition definitely has helped me in certain regards, like exposing certain things and so on and so on. But I mean, I guess if you train with people who are quite high level, you'd probably get the similar looks.
Yeah, that's something I appreciate your breakdown of that, because that's something I've thought about a lot too, is whether or not, because like every now and then you go to a visit different academies around the world and stuff, and you see people that aren't competitive and don't really compete, but that are just absolute monsters. It's like, dude, if this guy would compete, like, dude, he would do great. There's a guy in particular I can remember. He's like an accountant or something, and dude, they would always pull him into the competition training because it's like they need a tough guy. And dude, he'd whip everybody, but then he's just, putting back his suit and tying his tie and going back to work. It's like that guy has no idea what he could accomplish if he competed, but it's just not what he does.
I hate these people.
Yeah, I know, right?
They make me so sad. I get so depressed. I'm like, what am I doing this for?
Oh man, so yeah, it is an interesting thought because it's like, you see people that can clearly do it, that can clearly get to a high level and hang and even outperform sometimes the real competitive pro athletes and stuff. But so I guess it can be done. But I feel like at the end of the day, if you're not out there in the battlefield using your tools and really seeing what works and what doesn't against people who are not your friends and who are not holding back in any sense and who are really coming after you to win, that's got to be some pretty valuable data collection, I would imagine.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, people like that, it hurts me a little bit because they're so good at jiu-jitsu, yet they still have a stable financial income.
Yeah.
I feel like people like this shouldn't be allowed to train.
Just
Not at least you should limit their training. If like you should train at least like maximum twice a week. If you have like. It should be like tax brackets,
Yeah, exactly.
No, but in all seriousness, yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's definitely something different about competition, but I think most people, I mean, I haven't asked most competitors, but I'd imagine most competitors have had worse days in the training room than in competition. So I mean, obviously, maybe this is like what you want to be the case, and maybe some people might not be like this. Like for Craig, I'm not sure that this is like this anymore. But I'm sure he's had his fair share of tough days. But for the most part, I think it's very important to kind of get your ass beat in in the gym more than you do on the mat. I mean, on the competition mats. I think that's just usually a healthy way of having things done.
Yeah, well, it's kind of like that old adage that, when the training is tough, the competition becomes easier. Like you've already kind of put the most of the work is put in the training room, and then when you're out there competing, that's the stage to perform. So that's it's very good insight, man. I appreciate that. Joseph, I'll tell you what, man, we've reached about the halfway point of the show here. You already know what to expect. This is the Pummel game, man. For those not familiar with it, the Pummel is basically a series of random questions. Some of these are about jiu-jitsu. Some of them have nothing to do with jiu-jitsu. But Joseph, if you would like to play the Pummel with me, I would love to play this with you.
I'll be honored.
All right, buddy, cool. Question 1. Now, you're a young guy, man, so I don't know how much this is going to apply to you, but tell me the worst job you've ever had in your life.
Teaching kids class.
Dude, that is a tough gig. That is a tough gig. I have so much respect for people that can properly teach a kids class, man.
Likewise.
How long did you do that for?
Like one camp. I think it was like maybe like 3 weeks. I was like, I don't think I could ever do this again.
The best way I can describe that, it's like trying to wrangle squirrels. Like it's like you have these squirrels that are loaded up on sugar, and you're trying to corral them into one area and get them to do one thing and listen to you. It is tough, dude. That is a tough job.
It's really, I mean, but some people are so great at it, but definitely not me.
Yeah.
But then it's so, I wish every squirrel was the same,
Right.
There's some squirrels that I'm like, this is so easy, yeah. And the other one's like, where did the other squirrel go?
It's like there's no way I can get him down from there. Yeah. Dude, it really is like magic when you see someone that can just walk on the mats. All right, guys, come on, everybody, and the kids just gravitate towards that person. And like I love kids, and kids, I think for the most part like me too. But just getting them to focus on one thing when you're teaching something and not playing, it's tough. So I respect that you were able to do it for 3 weeks.
I think the kids they can like me, but they also have to respect me.
Yes.
And I don't know if this, I think this is pretty important because I feel like with the people who can really command and like manage a good kids class, it's like the kids respect them to some degree. It's like, I don't know how to do this.
Yeah, that's probably what the problem. They probably saw me because I tried being a kids instructor for a little while when I was a purple belt, and it was fun. But it got to a point where I'm like, okay, this is not my ball of wax. But I think that probably what you just said there is probably true. I think they probably saw me as just like a big kid, and so they were like, okay, yeah, he's just one of us. He's just taller than us, you know. But we don't have to listen to Ryan. He's an idiot. You know what I mean? So
the funny thing was I was still, I think I was like maybe an orange or blue belt.
Oh yeah, so you
like I was quite young. Probably a blue belt. I think hard to remember, but I was young. I was still in my like old days.
That's awesome. Yeah, it's a tough gig, man. If you made it 3 weeks, you did better than me, my man. So congratulations. What do you think is a secret talent that you have that people might not know about?
See, I've heard these questions before, but I never really thought about them being asked towards me. Let me think, actually. I mean, if I had something else, I wouldn't be doing jiu-jitsu.
Can you sing? Can you dance? Can you play an instrument? Can you draw?
I have passions, not talents.
Passions, okay. Yeah.
Talent means you have to be good at something. I mean, I like collecting bags.
Yeah?
Like backpacks, like travel backpacks.
Nice.
And I like to sing karaoke with my friends. But
there you go.
I'm sure, like, anyone who's spent a decent amount of time around me has definitely heard me singing very terribly.
That's amazing. Okay, now
give me random things.
Give me your top 3 favorite karaoke songs to sing.
This is a terrible question to answer. I don't think I could ever. It changes too. Like, this is so difficult. I'd say, like, recently I've been going through a country phase, and then, so I've been listening to a lot of Zach Bryan, if you know who that is.
Yeah, sure.
Just because I seem to like his music.
Is that a result of hanging out in Texas now? Is it you picking up country vibes?
Yeah, probably. Okay, I'll just say recently I like the song Spotless by Zach Bryan, just because it sounds nice. Second one, we'll go like karaoke. I don't know. I like Vincent by Don McLean.
Okay.
And I like, let's see, what's that Beatles song that I like? Wait. There's one that I really like, but I can't remember. I haven't listened to it in a while.
By the Beatles?
Yeah.
Yellow Submarine?
No.
No.
Just because I'm young doesn't mean I'm more sophisticated than that. What's it called? Norwegian Wood. Okay.
Norwegian Wood. Okay.
I like this song.
Nice.
Something about it I really enjoy. Okay. Wow.
That's excellent.
That had me
It's okay. Yeah. Anxiety levels coming down. We're good now. We're good. We remembered it.
We're good now. We're good.
You mentioned earlier that you wish you had a twin that you could do like A/B testing with whether or not competition has been helpful. If a scientist made a clone of you and you had to fight your clone, could you pass your own guard?
Yeah.
Yeah, you can pass your own guard, yeah.
Definitely.
Right. I figured that would be the answer. Yeah. That's excellent. What do you think is the worst injury that you've ever had?
Nothing too major. Maybe some sprains of the knees, but I sprained my meniscus recently, but that, I mean, I'm sure to many people this doesn't sound that bad, but I wasn't able to train for like 3 days, and then I was pretty okay. And I mean, I made sure not to like go crazy right after. I mean, I was very like cautious, but I went to a physio and they're like, okay, because there was no pop. Funny thing enough, not even from jiu-jitsu, from just playing spike ball.
Oh no.
I tweaked my knee. I'm like, I had actually I don't really have that many injuries from jiu-jitsu. Most of them are from obscure things.
That's always the worst feeling too. Like I've had injuries from like skateboarding, and I'm just like, dude, now I can't train. I'm not gonna ever be a Tony Hawk. I mean, I'm not gonna be an elite jiu-jitsu guy either. But it's like, dude, jiu-jitsu's my thing, and I'm hurting myself doing something that's not my thing, and now I can't do my thing. Like I'm an idiot. I shouldn't be doing this.
I think I've cut on 2 separate occasions. I've been wearing flip-flops, walking up an escalator, having slipped and cut my big toe on the escalator. And this is like a significant cut. I remember twice. Once when I was exiting a subway station in Nanjing, about to go to this like jiu-jitsu event thing. And my flip, but in both, and then the other time I was in a metro station in Sydney. Both times, actually, at least the second one, the first one in Nanjing, I was exiting the metro. Oh. But then on the one in Sydney, I was getting on the train. I slipped. I have basically in my flip-flop a pool of blood, and I have to still take the train. So I basically left a trail of blood where I walked and on the train. I was like, I can't think about the repercussions of this. This is just, I'm going to get to a place where I can deal with this as soon as I can.
Yeah, just imagine the bacterial infection risks just around a train station with an open foot wound. That's rough, man.
I'm happy it wasn't New York.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, no kidding. Yeah, some cities are definitely worse than others for sure. Oh man, dude. Yeah, being in flip flops is something that I use flip flops at the academy and sometimes around the house. But like when I see people functioning fully in flip flops, like where I live here, I'll see like little kids playing full soccer games in like flip flops, and I mean, these kids are like juking and moving and like playing like really high levels of soccer, and I'm just like, dude, how you're in flip flops, But some people are just really functional in flip flops. I don't know.
This has motivated me to because I don't like wearing socks.
Yeah. Okay.
So this has motivated me, and I don't like Crocs though. I mean, I think they're comfortable, but I don't like the cushioning that Crocs provide. So I got this barefoot shoe that are basically like Crocs.
Okay.
So this is the only shoe I've worn for like the last year. So as a result, I'm like, I refuse to wear flip-flops anymore. So this is the step. And I've had 3 pairs of the same shoe.
That's amazing.
What is the only shoe I want to.
What's the brand? What is it?
I'll bring it to you.
Yeah, let me see. I want to see. Yeah.
Right here.
Yeah, show me.
So these are like Vivos.
Okay.
So see, it's basically like
those are cool.
a Croc.
Dude, but those are way cooler looking than Crocs though, man.
Yeah, I definitely agree.
Yeah.
But I mean, I like Crocs too, but I think these are way better.
Those look way cooler.
Yeah, and then I still don't have to wear socks. It's amazing.
Yeah.
But I do wear if it's cold, then I wear socks.
So you just throw socks on underneath those. Yeah, cool.
Exactly.
That's
perfect for me.
That is a really good halfway point because like Crocs, I understand Crocs are comfortable, but then you also like you're suggesting you have to deal with the stigma of wearing Crocs because Crocs get criticized more than any other footwear in the world, I think. And so yeah, so it says there's the stigma, but then there's also that it's got the open back still, unless you have the strap thing that comes around. I don't know.
The race mode.
Yeah, the race mode. Then there's people that get them like decked out with pins and stuff.
J-Rod's selling those.
Is he? Yeah. What, does he have like custom ones that he makes?
Yeah, he has they're called Jits Bits, right? And they put it on the Crocs. He made like a B Team one, Belt ones. I got some from him, but I think they fell off of mine. I don't think they're meant to fit on these.
That's awesome. Well, dude, you've definitely found a happy medium for sure. Those are really cool. Those are called Vivos. I'll have to look into those. Those are cool. Have you seen those minimal shoes where it's literally like a man? It's maybe like a few, the thickness of like a few pieces of construction paper put on top of each other, but it's a really thin rubber. It's almost like you're wearing nothing. Like it's about as minimal.
I have one of these somewhere. I have one. They're called Zero shoes.
Okay.
And they're just like a very thin piece of rubber.
That's them.
And I quite like those, but the risk is similar. If I'm walking up because I don't like to sit on an escalator.
Yeah.
I like to sometimes run up an escalator.
Nice.
And so this is the risk it carries, where if the like the toe of it gets flipped and I step or I slip, still the same problem. That's why I have these.
Yeah, man. And I would always just be worried about them getting sucked into like an escalator or something like that, or if something. Obviously, there's zero protection. So if something lands on your foot, although I mean, unless you're wearing steel-toed shoes, that's always a risk, I guess. But I don't know. I just feel like you're more vulnerable if you're barefoot. You know.
Mm-hmm. But I do think there's something to be said about a minimally supportive shoe, because as a jiu-jitsu practitioner, I think it would only make sense to want your foot to be as strong as possible. So having all this, like, why would I wear like some basketball shoe that doesn't even let my ankle move for support when I'm about to get ankle locked 40 minutes later?
That's true.
You know, it's like, it makes sense. So this is at least my thought process to it.
That's awesome. Yeah, no, that's a good thought for sure, man. I can see where you're coming from. There's a lot of people that just talk about the benefits of being barefoot in general anyway. Like there's people that go running or hiking barefoot, or at least wearing like barefoot style shoes, you know, and they talk about all the benefits for arch support and just foot strength and your posture and your spine and everything. It kind of travels up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I did have flat feet before, and now my arches are pretty high. I definitely, I mean, I don't want to like preach about something, but it does
seems to have
some benefits, I think.
That's awesome, man. That's cool. What do you think is your favorite bad food to eat? Favorite junk food?
This is also a very difficult question, because people who know me, I've been called a glutton more than a few times. So, I mean, it honestly depends on the day, but if, let's say, I've been in the US for a while and I'm missing a lot of Asian food, probably just some like the dumplings in the US aren't real dumplings, I think, but like maybe some like normal dumplings, or like, I don't know how the English translation is braised pork rice in Taipei.
Okay.
Or this, I don't know. Also, two of my favorite dishes are it's called lu rou fan, and it's a Chinese dish where I think it's just awesome. It's like pork, very fatty pork, braised. I don't even know what braised means, but this is what they put on all the English translations.
Yeah.
And it's my dad makes it too, and it's amazing. And there's this thing called a fan tuan, which is like rice. Like basically a rice burrito, like a sticky rice burrito, and has like fried dough on the inside, pork floss, some different types of pickled vegetables, sometimes an egg. Oh, I love it.
That sounds pretty good.
Every time I go back, I'm like, Dad. And then this other thing called you fan, and this is like, it translates to oil rice. It's not like super oily, but it's like sticky rice, with like mushrooms, pork. I don't even know what my dad puts in it, but it's amazing.
Incredible. That's incredible, man. Well, dude, I'll tell you what. If you're getting called a glutton, but you have a six-pack, you're doing better than most. I think you're in good.
Without
good
jiu-jitsu, I'd be.
Oh, bro, I'm right there with you, dude. I'd be on that 600-pound life show. They'd be like wheeling me out of my house to get to therapy or whatever. Dude, jiu-jitsu is what keeps me.
Absolutely.
Oh, I'm a glutton too. Dude. So you mentioned
the only reason I train.
Yeah, exactly. Just keep your weight down. You mentioned there's a big difference between the dumplings in the U.S. and in Asia. What do you think the big difference is? What is it primarily?
The most painful difference is the price, but
yeah.
Probably, yeah. I won't go on a rant about this, but I'd probably say besides the price being the most painful difference, I definitely think the skin is much nicer. I mean, obviously, if you go to not a great place here, the skin still might be overcooked. But similar how with pasta, you don't want to overcook it. You want a certain amount of like rigidity to the skin.
Yes.
A lot of places they just overdo it. So I just put it in my mouth and it falls apart. You know. Or like, and then there are other things. But this is the main issue I have. This is like the thing I hate the most.
Yeah. And
then and all my friends who say, what's it called? What's that fast food? The place that sponsors Wiltsy?
Oh, Panda Express.
I don't like this place.
Yeah.
But otherwise,
Panda Express is definitely very fast food Americanized Chinese food. Yeah, it's not like if you live in China, you know what real Chinese food is. So that would be like how the Mexicans see Taco Bell. I think. Yeah, it would be something like that. It'd be like that level of
I'll say I want like Chinese food, and they'll suggest Panda Express, and I'll hate them.
It's like, dude, we're no longer, you're unfriended. That's a great way to get unfriended. Yeah, that's like if you tell me if we're going to get tacos and we pull into a Taco Bell, I'm like, dude, I can't associate with you anymore. I'm sorry, I can't be seen in public with you ever again. I'm sorry.
Absolutely not.
Joseph, what do you think was the scariest moment of your life?
I mean, like, this is like a hard question to answer. I mean, in terms of like mortal threat, like the risk of death, it's something that was, this is a fun story I don't think I've told before, but I wouldn't say this is most, but this is pretty fucking scary. But once I went to one of my friends, he did like a sanda, it's like a kickboxing martial art in China. I went to he trains there. I went to this gym, and I already had done jiu-jitsu. I was like an orange belt at the time. So I trained for a bit, and my friend, he said, "Oh, my coach doesn't think jiu-jitsu works." And he said he had a friend who did jiu-jitsu. He's like, and invited me to come over. And I was like expecting to do like some like sparring or like, cause I did actually some stand up before jiu-jitsu. Like I started like with a year of like stand up with just my friends. So I was like I felt like I wasn't gonna die on the feet. So I was like open to doing this. And then I went there and they're like, "Oh no, we can just do grappling because it's a like a striking art into takedowns. So you finish once the takedown has occurred and you just reset." So they wanted to grapple with me. And then we did this, and I like fucked up the instructor, like pretty badly. Like I choked him while I was on his back, and he slammed me, but I still choked him, and all this type of stuff. And then one of the instructors wanted to like grapple with me, and this is the last thing I remember in regards to this occurrence, where he was grabbing my rash guard, and I'm like, "Oh, you can't grab my rash guard," and this is the last thing I remember, and from what I've been told and from video, I got head kicked by the first guy behind me, and I got completely knocked out.
Are you kidding?
And then last time I came, I was like, when I came to, I was conscious before. There's video of me being conscious, but I have no recollection of this. Was at the police station. Thankfully, I had no real issues, and it was just like some crazy turn of events. But that I was pretty upset after that, but it didn't really have any effect on me. But I think that, they definitely weren't looked upon fondly after that.
Yeah, what a fucking coward. Like, honestly, what a coward. What a piece of shit. So you're rolling with the second guy, the first guy you beat up kicks you in the head when you're not looking. Wow.
Yeah, on the back of my head, like behind. He was behind me. I was like, I didn't even see anyone.
Wow.
But
what a coward.
I mean, people like that. It happens, but it's definitely not the person you want to be.
Yeah,
but
that's infuriating, man. It's infuriating. That's infuriating when you hear people about getting in like bar fights or like altercations in the street and things like that happen. That's still cowardice and still infuriating. It's really infuriating when you're supposed to be in a martial arts setting where people are supposed to have honor and a code of morality, and that we've agreed upon the fact that, hey, we're training together, we're practicing, we're exchanging martial arts here, and someone does something like that. That's awful.
I was a bit like the thing that, but I mean, it was good after all. Like, I mean, there were many people there like who supported me after, who was like very caring of me. But the annoying part was they lied about one. Like, they said that it was a striking setting, and they said, "Oh yeah, the strikes were allowed." Definitely not. I was like, we did a whole round of grappling. I have video of it, and then but it was like.
Yeah, but was it
whatever? I mean,
was it a multiple attacker setting though? Because it sounds like you got suckered by a second guy. So even if it was a striking setting, unless it was a multiple attacker drill or something, that's And
then I think I was young at the time, so my intention in going in there was to try get them to come train jiu-jitsu with me.
Sure.
I was like, but then I was like, oh, maybe not.
I guess not. I guess we're not going to be friends. But dude, you definitely don't want to be associated with people like that anyway. So that's, yeah, dude, that's infuriating. I'm sorry you went through that, man. What?
No,
I could see that being a scary moment, though. Yeah, especially like, yeah, you're training one minute, then you're waking up in a police station the next. That's definitely scary, man.
I remember I told my mother, I forgot jiu-jitsu. I can only remember a knee cut and a rolling guillotine.
Just starting all over, yeah. Oh man,
No.
Oh, dude,
Uh,
that sucks, man. Well, I'm sorry. Yeah, again, I'm sorry you went through that, but I'm also glad you don't have any like lingering effects or anything from it, because that's
Absolutely,
concussions can be scary for sure. What do you think is your most hated position in jiu-jitsu to get stuck in?
any position with Craig.
That's a great answer. That's a really good answer.
Unless I'm in a rear naked choke, everything else is terrible.
Everything else sucks, yeah. What's your favorite memory of training with Craig?
Oh, none. There's no such thing exists.
It's just miserable, right?
Oh no. I believe no. Actually, I have one where I put him in an ankle lock, and he pulled out and like popped his own ankle. And from what he said, he still feels the pain. So this brings me a great deal of joy, because it wasn't even my fault. He tried pulling out of it and popped his own ankles. I was like, perfect. This makes me very, very happy.
Now you can rest assured, whenever you're in a bad position with Craig, just know his ankle is sore. It's still hurting him.
Absolutely. This will stay with me for the rest of my life.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, Craig is such a fun dude, man. I love that guy. What do you think? Who do you think is your favorite grappler of all time?
Of all time, actually, that's also a tough one, because, like, in terms of grappling, like just pure grappling, still probably Gordon Ryan, definitely. Sure. I think I've definitely watched him some of the most. I think in terms of grappling, I think he's amazing. So, as a grappler, probably Gordon Ryan.
Yeah. Well, who do you think is your favorite MMA fighter of all time? You mentioned that you got into MMA, you were interested in MMA before pursuing jiu-jitsu. Who's your favorite MMA fighter of all time?
I think, despite the hate, probably John Jones. I mean, in terms of ability, it's pretty. I mean, besides his match with Thiago Santos and Dominic Reyes wasn't that impressive, but then him just murking Cyril Gane was pretty cool. Yeah. So I mean, other than that, there's some to enjoy to watch, but I mean, in terms of I feel like John Jones displayed everything, and it was all awesome. So probably great. Yeah.
Great answer, man. Yeah, that's a very good answer, man. What do you think is your favorite match that you've had in competition? Favorite jiu-jitsu match you've had?
Ooh, this is a cool question. Let me think. I would probably, in terms of the experience and the subjective experience, my match with Oliver Taza, just because it was pretty wild, but yeah, just quite a high pace, and I mean, maybe in the moment I wouldn't have preferred it to be that way, but looking back, it was pretty cool.
Yeah, that was a very entertaining match, man. That's definitely a good choice of all the ones you've had, for sure. This was one that was submitted by a friend of mine, and my buddy Leo Domingos wanted me to ask you this. He appreciates your body lock passes. Who do you think is the best body lock passer in the game today?
So I assume he's referring to the tripod-esque, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I basically took a lot of inspiration in terms of the leg pummeling from Gordon's float passing. But I haven't seen him use this much style recently. I know he did some stuff against Aaron Tex Johnson in their match. But in terms of the person I've had the most interesting conversations with about this pass is Paul Schreiner, and I know he had a lot of interesting things. I've trained with him before, and he had a lot of interesting things to say. And I believe on this one.
There you go. Yeah, right up there. Yeah.
he has an instructional on tripod passing. So, it was quite cool. I enjoyed talking to him about it. I think he had some very cool insights to share.
Yeah, that's a great answer. Yeah, Paul's a brilliant dude, man. I've really enjoyed his instructionals and conversations I've had with him on the show. He's a brilliant guy, man. So that's really cool. It's really cool that's where you picked a lot of that up from. What do you think is your biggest phobia?
Probably spiders.
Spiders,
definitely.
Yeah, okay.
Spiders, maybe snakes, something like weird stuff. I'm good.
What's the most traumatic interaction you've had with a spider?
I recall I was in South Africa,
Oh no.
and
Okay.
at my grandparents' place, and I probably wasn't the one that was most traumatized from this, but I hear my sister scream. We're in like the kitchen or the living room, and she's in the bedroom. This is when I was quite young. And then we were all run over. And there's like, in my memory, given I'm like maybe 5, or no, not 5, like maybe 8, 9. And the spider looked like this big. It was thick, like it was thick. It was big in the curtains next to the bed. I was like, this is terrible. I was like, I hate this. I already disliked spiders then. This just made it worse.
Sounds like one of those. It's like the size of one of those face huggers from Alien, where they, you know what I mean? They just latch on. Oh, dude. Anytime you see bugs from like Africa, Australia, Asia, bugs, man, there are some bugs out there that are like just next level as far as size and venom capacity, and oh man, it can get wild with insects out there.
Yeah, I was actually, despite Australia being home to so many terrible things, I had not one like I didn't see any of them. So I was very happy in my time in Australia. I was like, I haven't seen anything. I'm like, this is great.
Yeah, if you leave Australia without an animal attack story, it was a trip well spent. It was a good trip. That's for sure. What do you think is your most hated food? We talked about your favorite food. What's your most hated food? What's something you just cannot eat?
Probably something super weird like brains or something. Like, I mean, yeah, like I know my brother, he likes like pork. He'll eat like pork brains. I don't know if he.
Oh wow!
I don't know
really?
if that's his favorite food, but like, I mean, it's not uncommon. Like people will eat it. It's like on like menus here.
Yeah.
Like not everywhere. Not proper. I'm not going to propagate this rumor, but like so at certain places, like a pot place, they'll have like a pig's brain that you can eat.
Wow.
That you can put in the pot. I mean, I'm good without eating anything like that. But I like stuff like, for example, like cartilage, like intestines. I'm all good with that type of stuff. Like this, I have no issues with. But then when it gets like brains, like eyeball, I've had lamb testicles before. Not a big fan.
Okay.
Um,
How do they cook that?
anything. It was barbecued.
Barbecued lamb testicles.
I was in like Harbin, like northern China, and they had this on the menu, and my friend was like, "We have to try this." And then I was like, "Do we though?" And then we ended up having a lot more than I did. But then I ended up taking Kenta to the same place months later, and then I told him it wasn't balls, and he ate it, and you're like disgusting. And I had Kenta and my girlfriend eat it. I had them eat balls and dick without them knowing what it was. And I only told them after. And they were like asking me and my friend were just like, this is a lint. And then we were just laughing too hard.
Dude, Jozef, I'm a big fan of yours and I like you a lot, but I will never allow you to take me to a restaurant now knowing this, because I can't be set up like that, bro. I have a reputation and my character to uphold. I cannot be tricked into eating genitals. But that is a hilarious story, though. That is very funny. Is that the craziest thing you've eaten, you think? It was the lamb testicles, or is there something else that you've had that might be up there as well?
I think probably. I don't really venture into any weird animals, like nothing too crazy. I think that's the furthest I'll go.
That's it. Yeah. I think the weirdest thing I've had was like alligator tail in Louisiana. And
how was that?
Dude, it's actually pretty good. It's kind of a combination of fish and chicken. Like it's kind of like a slightly fishy chicken, but it was good, man. They give you this sauce to dip it in, like kind of some hot sauce type stuff. It was pretty good. I liked it actually. Trying to think what else I've eaten that's really weird. And they eat a lot of chicken hearts in Brazil, like barbecued chicken hearts. They're actually one of my favorites.
Oh, but that's really good.
One of my favorites, dude. I love chicken hearts. They're really good.
This is super good.
Yeah,
I like this a lot.
Some people are really bothered by the texture, but I think it's great, man. If you cook it right, if it's a little,
It's like slightly crunchy.
Yes, yeah. Like the outside.
I love
crisps.
this. It's so good,
dude. It's great. It's great. Yeah, it's great. And I'm
I second that completely.
Yeah, I guess gator tail. I guess gator tail is the weirdest thing I've. Oh, no. I've eaten bugs. I've had in Mexico. I had a grilled grasshopper. This guy was grilling grasshoppers and putting like salt and like lime juice on it and some little like cayenne pepper on the top of it, and he was just selling them on the side of the road. And I thought, I'm like you and your friends, where it's like I see something and it's weird. I'm like, damn it, I have to do it now. I have to. I can't just walk past a guy making spicy lime and salt and spicy crickets and not try one. So it's.
How was it?
It was pretty good. It was actually pretty. You know what it tasted like? If you've ever had those little, what are those things called? Those little Mexican chips. Saboritos. I think they're called saboritos. They're like little corn chips that are soaked in like lemon juice and with cayenne pepper on them. It reminded me really just of that. The texture was the same too because it's super crunchy. I liked it. I liked it okay. Yeah, I liked it okay. I think you've got me beat though with the lamb testicles. I don't think I've had nothing that quite that direction. But that's everything's a delicacy somewhere, right? What do you think is something you spend way too much money on? You mentioned travel backpacks. Is that where you spend most of your free money, you think?
I think I have like a whole rack of these travel backpacks right now. It's covered by gi, but this is like, these are all my nice ones. So like, if you can probably, this is just the ones I've accumulated in my recent travels. And I think, it's I guess it's a better outlet than something else.
Oh, yeah, dude.
Yeah, this is probably where just like more money than it should go. You know, like there's a certain amount of money that should go to buying like bags to store your things. I definitely think I've maybe gone quite a bit over that.
That's awesome. Well, so what's the biggest game-changing feature of a travel bag that you found?
Ooh, okay. Ooh, there's so many things I could talk about here. Like, don't get me. I'm legitimately thinking about starting a YouTube channel just to review the most. This is a tough.
I'll give you three. Give me three of your favorite functions that a bag can have. So,
Thule, which is a Swedish backpack brand, they have this this model of bag called the Ion, AIO. And they have a wet bag in there. There's two. They have I think the 28-liter bag and a 40-liter bag, and both of them have in the 28-liter they have one that folds in and it's stored in the bag. So if I forget to bring a garbage bag or a dry bag, I just put it in that compartment and it's perfectly fine and it's pretty easy to clean. Awesome. And then with the 40-liter one, you can take it out and clean it. This I think is super cool.
That's pretty brilliant.
So I remember buying this and I was like, this is amazing. This is and I would say some bags because not the bag that you take on the plane, usually the one that you'll carry or hold, is not the bag you're going to use every day. So I really like having packable backpacks. So very light and they'll usually pack into something like this big. And so this is the bag I can use every day instead of having an oversized bag or such things. So I like Matador. I think they're based out of Colorado, and they have very good lightweight packable bags. And so I have a few of those as well. And then I think the third game changer in terms of bags. Let me think. There are a few things that I really like. I'd probably say something that, maybe not a game changer, but something that I think is very important for me in a bag is having a separate laptop compartment to the main compartment.
Yes.
Because especially when going through security when traveling, I despise having to go through the main compartment to get my laptop.
Yeah.
I hate it with a passion. I refuse to carry a backpack that doesn't allow me to access my computer and technology separately to the main compartment.
100%, especially if you've taken the time to roll your clothing tightly and if you really had to use if you really had to aerospace engineer your backpack to make everything fit, and now you have a big stupid thing on the bottom, you have to pull everything out. That's the worst, bro. I'm with you on that 100%.
It's terrible.
Yeah. If you're a bag designer and you're doing that, you need to just retire and sell your company or something.
Go away.
Are you above using fanny packs, or will you rock a fanny pack?
I have plenty of fanny packs.
Okay, cool.
Not at all, by no means. I think fanny packs are a great thing to indulge in as well. I think they're so convenient. I'll either have like a sling or a fanny pack.
Dude. See, you're hitting the trifecta of efficiency, bro. You've got the hybrid Croc shoes. You've got the fanny pack. You've got multiple travel bags. Dude, you're a man of action, ready for the apocalypse, man. What do you think is your favorite superhero? Do you have a favorite superhero?
Oh, this is a great. Okay. I used to be quite into comic books. So, I mean, I could answer this in a few ways, in the sense where it's like, who do I think is the coolest? Yeah. Or who do I want to be the most? Or like, these are probably the two main ways I'd try to answer it. But let me think. Okay, I think the coolest is probably Deadpool. I just think
good choice. Yeah.
I remember like what grade was I in? I was quite young when Deadpool like the trailer came out, and my teacher showed it to us. I was like, "This is awesome." I was like like grade 5 or 6 or something like this. I'm like it was when it like way before it was released. They did like a pilot trailer, or like something to see if people would if it was well received.
Yeah.
And I was like, "This is so cool." And then I started like reading a bunch of Deadpool comics. And then I think probably the one I'd want to be, like, maybe, I think if I recall correctly, like Franklin, the Elastic Man's called Reed Richards, right?
Yeah.
I think?
Yes, yeah.
Okay, so I believe Franklin Richards is his son.
Okay.
And so in the comics, he's basically like a god to some extent, where he can basically manipulate reality. So I think this is one that I'd most want to be, because I think it'd be pretty sick.
So that'd be a pretty good one. You could use that for all kinds of mischief.
Like a Beyonder type level of like an Omega level mutant, like insane, like probably something like this. Like without giving it more thought than necessary, these will be my answer.
That's a solid choice. Well, my follow-up was going to be, what would your superpower be if you could choose one? But manipulating reality, I don't think anyone's brought that one up on the show, so you get extra points for that one. That was good. What do you think is your biggest pet peeve?
My biggest pet peeve is when people are late.
When people are late. That's an annoying one. Yeah.
I mean, I've with certain people I've adjusted so that I'll also come late, because I know they will be late. But when it's not agreed, like when it's not like a known thing and they're late, I can tolerate 10 minutes, but anything more than this, I get annoyed. But then there's some people that must have leeway, but it hurts me deep inside. I've sent this video to a few of my friends where Van Neistat, a YouTuber, he has a video on punctuality. It's like 20 minutes long, and I love it. It's a great description of people who are late. That's
excellent, man. Dude, the world of jiu-jitsu, that's a tough one too, because like, let's be real, there's a lot of that. Like, I deal with it a lot, just people missing interviews or being late or whatever, and I'm used to it now. But yeah, that's the world of jiu-jitsu is full of people that are late to a lot of things.
They call it Brazilian time.
Exactly. I think that's something that we all absorbed from the Brazilians, man. Shout out to the Brazilians. I love you guys, but damn, are you guys never on time for anything? It's a cultural thing.
I'll shout out to Kenta. Kenta, the least Japanese person I've ever known. I don't think there's an ounce of Brazilian blood in him, but something. He doesn't like being on time.
That's amazing.
I love him.
Oh man, no, that's definitely a good answer, man. And final question for the Pummel game, Joseph. If a zombie apocalypse breaks out right now, what's the first thing you do, and what's your plan from there?
First thing I do, yeah. Again, this is another example of me having heard the question but not thought about what I'm going to do. Let's say, who do I know with the most guns? Actually, I'd probably try to find my way to Texas and take refuge in someone's home. You know, I like even my Airbnb, he had like 8 guns for one guy. I was like, this is crazy. I just need to make it clear I'm not a zombie. I'll probably make my way to Japan or something. I think somewhere there. Otherwise, like here, I'll have to lock myself in my room, and my dog's not going to help me. He's definitely not. He's not up for killing zombies. He's basically a sheep.
That's awesome. Well, the fact that you've made connections in Texas, it puts you in a better position than a lot of people. That's for sure. If you can make your way to Texas, I think Texas is the most prepared for zombie shit. So that's.
I'll find Tim Kennedy.
Yes,
Listen,
dude.
I'll befriend him.
That's the guy. That's the guy, man. Yeah, if you can make friends with Tim Kennedy, you're in good shape for sure. And Joseph, that was the final question for the Pummel game. Congratulations, you win. You got your double underhooks. I wanted to pick your brain a little bit on no-gi guard passing, because obviously that's a huge aspect of your game. And there's a lot we could talk about here. What do you think are some of the most critical concepts for passing the guard when there's no gi to hang on to?
Sure, yeah. I mean, I don't think I'm going to say anything that no one said before, but like for me, things that have been helpful is like trying to interpret my opponent's positioning. So, for example, and then trying to act accordingly. So, something I think Danaher like communicated very well, like, is this idea of like either you pass the legs first and then pin the upper body, or you can pin the upper body first and then pass the legs. This is kind of a way that I kind of see how I fit in my tripod passing and my camping, like side to side passing together. And so I either look to, like, for example, for the tripod, it's like an illustration of pinning the upper body first and then maneuvering yourself in a way where you pass the legs. And this is very easy to end up in a pinning position because obviously the upper body is pinned. And I think I first heard Danaher talk about this when he talked about his half guard passing. And then in regards to like the opposite, like I think a lot of the camping, this has also been popular. I think probably due to like Gordon and Danaher talking about this a lot more. Is like kind of the opposite, where you pass the legs and you maintain this flank position, or it doesn't necessarily have to be flanked. Like camping can be different, but more classical camping would be maintaining a flank position over time, where you pass the legs and then you eventually pin the upper body. And so I think this is quite helpful for me, because then I'll think about ways where, okay, is my partner really stopping me from like let's say they're playing a seated guard. This is going to be harder for me to flank the legs per se, and might be easier for me to pin the upper body just because our upper bodies are closer. And vice versa. If they're supine, it might be easier for me to pass the legs because their upper body is so far away. So this is something I think that's been quite helpful for me in terms of my thought process.
That's great, man. Yeah, I really like that. Yeah, it's interesting because jiu-jitsu is very much like chess in many ways. Like one way that it's similar to that is that there's options. There's so many options we can use against our opponent, but each option we have has like an inherent advantage and disadvantage. You know, like when it comes to passing guard, how do you generally analyze the risks and advantages of a given position before committing to using it?
Yeah, I mean, I tend to basically think about the situation that is presented and what may be appropriate versus inappropriate. So, for example, I may find it inappropriate to try to pin the upper body if my opponent is supine. So this might be just an example. This isn't necessarily the case, because I think there are ways to go about doing this. But just trying to think about your opponent and the posture they're in. And posture not necessarily only referring to the integrity of their spine, but also just the positioning of their body and how this may lend itself to certain things. So very easy examples, and this isn't anything revolutionary. It's okay, if their posture is very high, their legs might be available, versus if their posture is very low, their head might be available, and stuff like this. And I think I try to train in a way where I really take this to heart, where I'll ask my partner to change their body positioning based on what I'm doing, and then try to think about follow-ups and what I can do when they give me this reaction. And I'll ask them to give not just one reaction, because I don't think it's just they can have posture up or they can posture down, or they can also try to blade their body. They can also try to backstep, or certain movements that might really change the position. And what I'm really trying to do in my time when drilling is to try to discover and understand those positions and play with them. So I think, trying to see what they're doing and having that dialogue with my partner for me is very important.
That's great, man. That's really awesome. You know, in your instructional that you filmed with us, there's something interesting you discussed. You discussed the dichotomy of direct and indirect engagement when passing guard. Would you mind explaining the difference between those two and how they're applied and used together?
So yeah, like I mainly think of this in terms of either like gripping or forcing someone supine. So like in terms of gripping, this is very common in wrestling where you don't necessarily have to have a grip on someone to exert control. Like similarly, you'll see people arm drag when people control their wrist, right? And you can do similar things when hand fighting. And I think this is something that maybe, I mean, obviously most of the good people do this, but it's not something that I've heard discussed a whole lot. Um, and then obviously the interplay between the two. I think a lot of people focus on getting their own grips and hyper focus on actively gripping, as opposed to using this indirect control you can have over your opponent to not only regrip, but also put yourselves in better positions. Like I also talk about this idea of like breaking versus negating grips. And this is almost similar where if I break a grip, this is very self-explanatory in the sense where I break it as in I remove the grip and no, you no longer have a grip. But negating a grip is more along the lines of moving yourself in a position where the grip is no longer useful. And I think this is also like kind of a similar theme. But I think this is like very important when trying to think about engagement in this type of way. And then some what you were saying before in terms of direct and indirect, we can also think of this as a means to force someone's supine. So like you can directly affect their body, whether that be pushing on their shoulders or lifting their ankles, where you do something to create, it's like cause and effect. There's a direct like course between like what you're doing and the effect that it's going to have. Or you can put your opponent in a situation where they kind of have a decision to make. So for example, if you were to flank your partner, especially in the situation where they're seated, since their back's off of the mat, there's an inherent degree of back exposure. So if you were to get to an advantageous angle, the person who's on bottom is faced with a decision. Do I let my back get exposed or do I concede to my back? Because by putting your back to the mat, now you've denied your partner back exposure. And in order for them to actually return to a situation where they've gained back exposure, they have to find a way to take your back off of the mat. Because it's not possible to take someone's back if it's on the mat. You have to take it off. So thinking about things like this, and then you can play the same game with not only angle, but also like threatening a front headlock, threatening a body lock, so on and so on.
That's outstanding, man. In what ways will you use movement alone to create opportunities for passing? Like, do you use movement just for flanking? Is there other reactions you can try to get from your opponent? How do you use movement by itself as a tool?
I'm not the best at this. I'm much more of a hand fighter myself. But I think movement in terms of feinting is also a good thing in terms of getting someone to commit one way and having to see if they're going to react or not. But people who I think use movement much better than I do, like a good friend of mine, Owen Jones, I think I actually really quite like his movement passing, where like watching his run through European trials, I thought it was even I also experienced rolling with him. I thought his side to side was quite cool in the sense where what he was doing was very interesting for me. So I think he'd probably have something better to say about it than I do.
No, Owen was actually just on the show. You know, in fact, he shouted you out too. He said that
sweet.
He was the youngest ADCC European trials winner for 15 minutes until you won your division because you were born like I think 30 days before he was. So that was we were laughing. You were saying that you're primarily more of a grip fighter, and that's very true. For anyone that watches your game, I can definitely see how important that is within your game. What are the biggest mistakes you see people make as they're learning grip fighting? What is something that a new student could do to accelerate their ability to grip fight effectively?
I'll be plagiarizing Danaher here once again.
That's okay. We all do it. Yeah.
I mean, very influential, I'd say, in the jiu-jitsu thoughts, but not making the distinction between gi and no-gi. I think it goes both ways, whereas the way you're going to have to grip for one and the other is very different. Whereas in the gi, I think it's more important to emphasize the initial grips and gaining initial grips because of the robustness of grips, right? If I get a good collar and sleeve, like you see AOJ people do this all the time. They get a grip, they pull with the grip, or they get it from guard, and then they sweep off of the same grips. There's no like interchanging of grips. They use one grip and they do everything they need to from there. Just because it's so robust, and if you lose the grip, you kind of, especially in guard, I think it is problematic in the gi. If you're on your back and you have no grips, this is pretty bad. I find that usually people tend to favor one over the other, and I find that a lot of the issue usually is like making the transition from one to the other, or at least this is where you can make the difference very apparent. Where like in the gi, again, the robustness of grips, you make initial grips and you basically want to keep them because letting go of them could put you at a position where you're in a bad spot. Versus in NoGi, the initial grips I don't think matter nearly as much as in the gi. Where in NoGi, it's more of the chaining of grips and the follow-ups from certain grips and how you look to when you lose grips and working from the position when you've lost grips. Like what I was talking about, like indirect control. I think this is a lot of what's important in NoGi, where it's not just, okay, how can I make the most dominant grip possible? Because a lot of what's necessary in like using a grip is having the grip for a duration of time in which you can create a meaningful advantage, right? And a lot of times in NoGi, it's slippery. There are no grips. So it can be difficult for you to go about doing that if you're just focusing on one grip at a time, as opposed to chaining grips. So I think this is where most people struggle, whether it's gi or no gi, where it's like they're not necessarily what's it called, super like some. I know like a lot of my no gi friends who I'll just murk in the gi because they're not worried about their initial grips, and then vice versa, where a lot of my gi friends, they focus too much on having one strong grip, but they're not really used to chaining grips, and then they lose the advantage.
I think that's definitely a struggle a lot of people had. I know I had that too. Was committing to your brain, or I guess having it a strong belief that, okay, this grip in particular is the one that I do things with, and this is the one I got to work my way towards. And like you said, grip fighting is a very dynamic, very fast-moving thing. So if you can just be in a situation where you're chaining grips together, like you said, and understanding what the options are depending where you're at in the chain, that's a really effective way to do that. So very, very great advice, man. I appreciate you giving that insight. And obviously we see you use that so well in your matches. So anyone that studies your matches can see how that works in an actual situation. So really cool stuff, man. For anyone out there that wants to learn all this stuff, being able to pass guard, particularly in a no-gi situation, the grip fighting, understanding what your options are. Jozef has a great instructional with us that he just recorded with us. It's called Engaging Without Regrets, and it's available right now at BJJFanatics.com. He covers all this stuff. So I really do encourage you to guys go check it out. Jozef, in closing, man, this is a very obvious question. I already know what you're going to say, but what is your major goal for 2024?
Do my best in ADCC. So this is probably the most important goal. After that, probably get my driver's license.
That's awesome. That's a great answer, dude. Well, man, Jozef, obviously, man, I'll be rooting real hard for you at ADCC, man. I think a lot of us will. You've been a really exciting athlete to see break out on the scene, and seeing such great skill level in such a short amount of time in your lifespan is really impressive. So I appreciate you taking the time to be here today and sharing with us your thoughts on development. And you gave some great content today. I really do appreciate your time.
Thank you. I appreciate it as well. It's very flattered being on this podcast.
Well, folks, unfortunately, we're fresh out of time. Jozef, as I said, man, you're someone that I always really enjoy watching compete, man. I'm sincerely flattered that you were a listener of the podcast since back when it was the old show. I really do. That really does mean a lot to me. And you're welcome back anytime. You are always welcome here on the show anytime you want to come back.
Awesome. I appreciate it. It was an honor.
Excellent. For anyone out there that wants to keep up with Jozef, it's real easy to do so. He's mostly active on Instagram, so follow him on Instagram, Jozef Chen JJ. He posts a lot of great content there, so make sure you guys follow there. Also, if you guys want to learn from Jozef, you can learn from him anywhere in the world here at BJJ Fanatics. He's got a great instructional with us called Engaging Without Regrets. And actually, the full title is actually a funny one. It's Engaging Without Regrets, When to Stay In and When to Pull Out. So I have to ask, did Craig Jones help with that title? Did he suggest that? Was that, or did you come up with that on your own?
I came up with it on my own, but it was inspired by him, and I asked him about it. So I definitely asked for his feedback.
That sounds like a Craig Jones, at the very least, Craig Jones influenced in the title. So that's very good.
Absolutely. Gotta stay in brand, you know? You gotta.
That's outstanding. So, guys, again, the instructional, engaging without regrets, when to stay in and when to pull out, available right now at bjjfanatics.com. Phenomenal passing instructional, guys, so check it out. And that's going to do it for this episode, everybody. I really appreciate you tuning in. Please stay tuned for the next episode of the BJJ Fanatics podcast.